Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning. Why?
Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you get stuff like this.
You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately.
That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Welcome to this month's Salute to Service, and with me today I have Vietnam veteran and Medina County resident, Mr. Jim Hoessle. How you doing, Jim?
Hi, Ed.
How's it going?
Good, good.
So you're not originally from Medina County. You grew up in
Wayne County, yes.
When
right.
did you grow up down there?
Oh, I think in the early 50s, my folks bought a little farm down near what used to be called Madisonburg, outside of Worcester. Mm-hmm. And we stayed on the farm for a little garden farm for a little while, and then lived in the city, right next to Worcester College until I left for school.
So did you go to college, or?
Yeah, I worked locally there for a little bit in Worcester, and then went to Ohio University, and then I quit school and worked some more, and then I got drafted in 1967.
1967. So
Yeah.
you were about, what, 20, 22 years old?
20 years old.
20 years old. How did it feel for a young guy at 20 years old getting drafted?
Pretty scary.
67 was pretty much the wars building up and everything. And
Yes, yeah, it really was.
so when you got drafted, where'd you go first?
Well, basic training, what the Army called basic training, was at Fort Knox, and so we had, basic training consisted of, was it 16 weeks
Something
at that time?
10 weeks, 12 weeks?
Something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Seemed like a long time.
It was 12 when I went, so I don't know, maybe
Seemed like a
yeah.
long time, but anyway, and that was in the fall of '67, and I'd just been married too, so I was married for about a week, and then I was at basic training at Fort Knox, and it was essentially pretty good duty. The first thing I figured out was that I was not used to hard leather shoes. I was used to tennis shoes.
Tennis shoes.
So I had to get over that struggle, but from my point of view, basic training was very good.
Do what you're told and keep your.
Yes, do what
head
you're
up.
told.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
So after basic, you went on to Fort Sill to learn your job, or?
Yeah, after basic, well, during basic, in the first couple of weeks, I did sign up for another year, so I could roll out of what they called U.S., which was a draftee U.S. designation. Then I went to R.A., or regular Army, I think is what it is. So I ended up taking 3 years instead of just 2 years. And among other things, that gave me a choice on some schools, and one of them was a weather meteorology type school with the artillery.
Right.
And so that's where I went for advanced training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Very familiar with met data. Very important
Oh, yeah?
for where the ballistics of the shell go and everything else.
Yeah, it was great MOS, very interesting. A lot of good people. Interestingly enough, I just thought of this, that there were some guys there that had been drafted that were pilots, were commercial pilots, and for whatever reason they refused to. They did not want to fly helicopters in Vietnam. They did not want to fly fixed wing in Vietnam, but they got drafted anyway. Right. And so they ended up at the weather school because of their background. Right. So they had a lot of.
So they were flying weather balloons.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right.
So how'd you like Fort Sill?
Well, Fort Sill was pretty. It's like a desert for the most part.
Big sky country.
Yeah, big sky country. It's not real exciting. I sent pictures of the barracks home to my dad, who was a World War II vet, And he said, I think those are the exact same barracks that we stayed in the 40s when he was in artillery training.
I think they probably just tore them down a few years ago.
I've been back in the last 5 years, and there's some of them left, but I think a lot of them are
gone. Yeah.
But we ended up, my wife moved down in the spring of '68, and so we lived in a little trailer in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is the town down there. Yeah. But Oklahoma, very windy, very dusty, very cold.
Once you get to the edges of town, there's nothing.
Nothing.
No,
Nothing.
no, there's not a whole lot. Some buffalo and some big steer.
Well, that's good. Buffalo, they have a place called Medicine Bow, which is a big reservation, and that was we could picnic out there, so that wasn't bad.
You remember a place called Mears, Oklahoma, where they had the steakhouse out there? You go out there and they pretty much kill the cow in the field for you and drag it in and give you a chunk of meat out of it. So.
But that time, one thing that did happen, that's when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And so we flew as a unit from Fort Sill with artillery and set up guns, 155 millimeter cannons on a hill overlooking Washington, D.C. And
really?
We never had any real live ammunition, but we did have a presence there when the riots were happening in Washington, D.C. after that assassination.
Wow.
And when we left, my wife was not made aware of where I was at. I just didn't come home that night.
Yeah.
So for 2-3 days, she didn't know where.
Just gone.
Yeah, we're just gone until somebody from the base camp at Fort Sill let her know.
So when you went over to Vietnam, did you go right from Fort Sill, or?
No, we. In my case, we were moved to Fort Carson, Colorado, and it was called the 5th Mechanized Infantry Division, and our symbol was a red diamond.
Right.
Red diamond. So we trained and packed, loaded up trains with all our gear for the unit, and then that was moved by train to the West Coast, and then went by ship to Vietnam, and then in late August, early September, we flew from Colorado to Alaska to Japan to Vietnam. And then we hooked up with our gear, and then.
Well, when did you get into Vietnam?
In the fall of '68.
Fall of '68. So Tet Offensive was not.
Tet Offensive was was pretty much wound down, but where we went was right next to Khe Sanh, which is a real hotbed for the Tet Offensive.
Did you leave your wife back at Fort Carson?
She went back home to her hometown in Ironton, Ohio.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, but.
So what's going through your head when you're sitting on that plane going over to Vietnam?
That's a good question, because we loaded up and we had our weapons, our jungle gear on. We had no money. There was nothing to spend it on.
Right.
And the plane that we went on, a C-141, I think, our benches were cloth, the straps, seats.
The red
so that's the way we flew over. And so you don't know, oh man, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And when we got to Vietnam, they started splitting us up, and we flew in a smaller craft. I think they were called Caribous or 130s, which was a small transport plane. So there were no benches in that seat, but moving skids inside the plane.
Right.
So when the plane's moving around, you're kind of rolling around in the inside of this. So that wasn't bad, but when we flew it, it was dark, and we could see flashes of light. Some kind of firefight was happening. And said, oh boy.
So did you wind up on a fire base?
We flew into Quang Tri City in Quang Tri Province, which is right on the DMZ, demilitarized zone, between North and South Vietnam. When we landed on what they call PSP, or perforated steel plate. Yeah. And it sounded like the plane got hit, so it scared the.
It's a pretty rough landing on those things.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Landed on a regular runway. Yeah.
Most of us are in there. Well, the pilot and the co-pilot, the guys on the plane, they thought it was pretty funny that we're scared.
Right.
And when we got out, we bolted. We ran away from the plane, and then nothing happened for 3 days. We sat there on the airfield for like 3 days before we went to our new camp, which we helped the Seabees built, called Camp Red Devil. And it was between, the way I remember it was between Khe Sanh and Laos. So it was in that
Right.
area, right on the wire for the DMZ. There were actually rolls of wire right there that we helped put up.
So was that like your artillery fire base or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had at that time they were mechanized 155s that were set up on either side of us. You know.
So you spent a year over there, I assume.
Yeah, 1 year almost to the day. Yeah. Mhm.
And what's the year like being in Vietnam for you?
Well, we had a lot to do. We had a lot of building activity, and and every night we had duty every night. So guards are out, and we're watching the fire base, and there was a lot of helicopter activity, and there was some incoming, but it was pretty quiet. Once in a while, we'd get incoming rounds from Quai Son, from the Marine base,
Oh,
because
okay.
they were so close that a 50 caliber would carry easily
Right.
to where we were at, and we'd stop. We're the good guys, no more.
Don't shoot.
But
this
we'd
way.
do the same thing,
Right.
with our stuff, and that happens.
So did you wind up out on paroles, or were you pretty much on the fire base doing?
We did a few ambush patrols where we basically go out and on a supposed known trail and wait, and I didn't have a lot of combat activity there, but after about 6 months at Quang Tri, they split us up so that we weren't all leaving the same place at the same time.
Same time.
So a couple of us went to Cu Chi, which is down close to Saigon. So I ended up at Cu Chi base with the 25th Infantry
Right.
for the last 6 months.
So when you get ready to come home, I mean, you're winding down. You got a month left, a couple weeks left, a couple days. You start to get a little cautious.
Well, you try not to think about it, the short timers, what everybody,
Yeah.
short timers, and really nervous. And I remember guys just really very, very, very worried about the guys who would come in who have been out off the base camp for weeks
Right.
and weeks, and have been through a lot of trouble, and they really don't want to go back out because they're,
Right.
because something bad's going to happen, and it could.
Yeah.
It could
How do you
happen.
figure you got through 10 months, 11 months,
Yeah.
that last month you want to...
Yeah.
So when you come back home now, how much time did you have in the service when you come back to Fort Carson?
Well, I had another year
Another
to
year?
go. So Fort Carson, Colorado was great duty, and I was stationed, our work position was at the Army Air Base. So I was able to fly, get a private pilot's license for fixed wing while I was there. I was able to go to night school through some military plans.
Right.
I went to University of Southern Colorado, some geology course. So there were a lot of things that the Army or the military
Right.
can help you do. All you got to do is, kind of
Got to kind of work your way into it.
take advantage
Did
of
you
it.
climb Pikes Peak while you were out there?
I did.
Yeah.
But I didn't climb. I climbed it in my Volkswagen.
You drove up it?
I drove it, but I didn't climb it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful view up there, isn't it?
Terrific.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Terrific. Yeah.
So when you got out of the service, you came back to Medina, or
No. Well, my home was Worcester, Ohio, and my wife was from Ironton.
so when did you come up to Medina?
Came up to Medina in about 95, 96.
Mhm.
I worked with the construction company as a civil engineer for 37 years, and so I moved with the work.
Right.
We did a lot of work. Still, our company does a lot of work in Ohio and West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Michigan. So traveled a little bit. So before, I lived in Kettering before,
Kettering, West Virginia?
Ohio, down
Ohio?
by
Okay.
Dayton,
All right.
for 10 years, and then we moved up here to follow the work.
So how do you think your experience in the military transferred over to your civilian job at all?
Well, I can tell you this, that I went back to school at Ohio University and graduated as a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And the first interview I had, third interview I had, was with the fella, with the company I ended up working for.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to know about my construction experience in this. Well, probably the biggest thing we ever built was a bunker that I ever, in Vietnam, and I told him how we built it and all that. And later, years later, this fellow that hired me told me that's why he hired me.
You built a damn good bunker.
Because we built a good bunker.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
So, all the time you spend in the military and you get out and then you go to work for 30 years, and now I know you spend a lot of time with the VFW and the American Legion and the different veterans organizations doing a lot for your community. And I assume you're retired from being a civil engineer. Why is it important to do all those things you do?
We know when I retired, that's when I started really getting involved. And prior to that, I really didn't spend much time with the veterans groups. And if anything, I probably avoided them because I didn't want to get involved with it. But the more I got involved with it, the more men and women that you meet that are veterans or spouses of veterans have similar experiences, similar views on life in general, and what's important.
There's a bond there.
Yeah, what's important? Is your country important? Yes, it is. Was the military important? When I was in the military the last few months, all I wanted was out, to be honest with you. But the real deal is what a great experience it really was for me. In the military, when I got out in the GI Bill, that helped pay my way through college and anybody that's had the experience probably can identify with that stuff. You get a chance to grow up.
So when you got out, I mean, getting out of the service back in 1968, 69, 1970 time frame was not necessarily a good experience for everybody. Did you experience any of that negativity going on?
Yes. When I first, I was out of the military for about 5 days, and then I was in school down in Athens, Ohio, and OU, and there was a lot of negativity from professors, for example, even in the engineering college.
A lot of them had dodged the draft.
Oh yeah, a lot of them had dodged the draft. A lot of them were anti-military, and they were not bashful about telling you that. But the few guys that were military that I was in school with, well, we had kind of an attitude of our own. So that it really didn't bother us that much. But that year, 1970, a lot of schools had closed down early in the spring because of riots. So I didn't know till I got back in the fall in Athens that there would even be school because they had closed down earlier. But it within a couple years, that kind of just went away.
Kind of faded.
Just faded. But it was rough. And I remember there was when I went home to Worcester, there was a little bit of that. But I do remember my mom, when I came home, she had a big banner.
I mean, it seems like when you talk to people, they either experienced it or they never saw it. And I guess, I mean, a lot of the guys I know came back through California and stuff, and there was a lot of things going on out there.
Yeah, we heard about it, and I went through some airport, when we came back. But either I was oblivious to what was going on, but I did not personally see that. Like in California, and then we went to Kansas City, and we were in the airport. Didn't see it there. There was no great welcome, but there was nothing.
Yeah, there was no banners or anything like that.
But I could see it happening, but I didn't really.
So let's flash forward to today, and I know everything like you said, you do with the veterans organizations, and the homecoming that men and women receive today is much different. And I know I think it has a lot to do with guys like you and the Vietnam veterans, and what you did to change that persona of the nation. We got, next year we're doing this 50th commemoration of the Vietnam War here in Medina County. Why do you think it's important to do that? Why do you think it's important to remember the Vietnam War and the men and women that served? And how did that change the face of the nation on how we view our men and women today?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for men and women that have experienced either Vietnam or those sorts of things, to pass an education along, an education to the community and to the younger people, to try to tie it into their everyday lives. And maybe you said this, to try to tie, something that happened in Vietnam when maybe we lost one of the guys from Medina County. Something was going on here that you can tie that together, and that's real. It's not story, but that's a real event. This is what can happen to your soldiers, to your family, That's why we should be vigilant and pay attention to what's going on in the world, because in my case, when I was in high school and this was getting started, the Vietnam stuff was getting started, I really didn't pay attention.
No.
I had a family, my dad, uncles, all World War II vets, but did I put those together?
Right.
It's all sort of the same thing. It's a
Right.
conflict
Right.
when people are getting killed and hurt badly. And
I don't think people don't realize that your life back here, the everyday activities that go on, and somebody could be losing their life at that very moment. And how do you put that together?
But one more time, so with your leadership, we've got an opportunity this coming year to educate folks around us with what was going on in a very good way, and tie it to everyday lives back home.
Yeah, so just for our viewers, the federal government's doing a 50th commemoration of the Vietnam War, and it is going on to 2025. It is the exact same time frame of the war. And here in Medina County, we've chosen 2016 to do that commemoration. And like you said, it's not for us, it's not for the men and women that, are veterans and understand the war, or for the Vietnam veterans. It's really for the community to come out and understand the sacrifices that people like yourself gave during that time frame. And
I got to put a plug in here for the wives that stayed home and they don't know what's going on. I don't know how.
It's true.
And they know better than anybody what it's like to be back.
Yeah, I tell my wife all the time, it's much easier being a soldier than it would be to be a spouse.
Oh,
I couldn't be the spouse.
No, I would not be.
No. I mean, my days in Iraq and Afghanistan were easy compared to someone that has to sit home and worry about a loved one. I couldn't do that.
You worry, you don't know. I got to tell you, I listened to some tapes, reel-to-reel tapes that I made. My wife would send me a tape from home with the voice of our baby. Right? And so I played those, and hearing the anxiety in her voice then, 50 years ago. And she said, I just want to make sure that you could hear your son.
That's amazing.
Can't even talk about it.
So you had some pictures of some big radios and stuff that you were using over there, and that's way before my time. I got to tell you.
Yeah, these had tubes in them, electronic.
I remember the tube TVs because I used to have to go to the drugstore and test them at the testers. Remember?
Yeah, cool.
But tell me a little bit about those radios. What were they, and what did you do with them?
Well, I think the pictures were in Vietnam and in Quang Tri in particular, and we had communication with the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and of course, and the Army artillery. And so every 2 hours, I think, we would send out a weather broadcast. And so those were radios, so we had communication with USS New Jersey in particular, and we'd get on, this is Mike Echo Tango RO, whatever RO is. And we'd send that out, and that's what that was for. Also, there was a receiver that was a tracking device for our weather balloons. It would send up a frequency controlled radio sonde. Radio sonde is what it was called, and then we'd get a printout back from those units.
So just correct me if I'm wrong here, being a little bit of an artilleryman here. So the weather data is important because you send up the weather data and the ballistics of that munition flies way up there. And depending on what the weather is way up there is how you set your charges and aim the guns and everything else, because that weather affects the bullet.
Well, the Navy was good at that. They'd send back, okay, send us your Kentucky windage.
Right.
So you're getting wind speeds, wind direction, pressure, temperature.
I think the barometric pressure is the most important thing too, because wind isn't really.
Yeah.
I think the Navy's bullets are big enough, the wind doesn't matter.
Well, that's funny because this is one of the times they were doing saturation bombing in North Vietnam. So the B-52s and ships like USS New Jersey are firing shells 20 miles from the Bay of Tonkin into North Vietnam, and you could physically see the shells look like they're in slow motion
going over.
Yeah, and then
Well, the Jersey's a battleship, right?
Yes.
So they're shooting those big 16-inch, big things, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I remember seeing pictures of some of the mountains over there, and literally they would just put a hole through the mountain. It'd be like a cave, and you know, there's some guys standing in this big hole. It's amazing. It's about the size of a Volkswagen or so.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, if anybody is interested in the 50th commemoration here in Medina County in donating to help us commemorate that important historic event, or if you'd like to donate some of your time, feel free to contact us at the Medina County Veteran Service Office. I got to ask you, I ask everybody that comes on the show, if you had it to do over again, would you do anything different as far as going into the service?
Yeah, there's always, yes, in my case, yes. I had an opportunity in Vietnam. This is kind of peculiar. So toward the end of my stay, the last 6 weeks, we had an NCO club, which is a canteen for guys coming in from that had been out in the field for a long time, or the on-base people. So they asked me to work the canteen as a bartender. Right. So it was actually a part-time job there. So I had something to do, and it was pretty secure because it was like a big bunker, you know. But anyway, so my time is about up, and the military came to me. The CO came to me and he said, we would like to offer you another NCO club in Vietnam for 6 months, and here's the deal. We'll give you 30 days, an extra 30-day leave. We'll give you another stripe, and we'll pay you, actually pay me, it was like $1.40 an hour, to be a manager of an NCO club.
And that was an actual job in the service back then.
It was an actual job back in the service. And I had a family back home, and I said, well, I get a 30-day leave, I go home, but then I'm coming back to Vietnam, and who knows what. So that would have been 69 into 1970.
Yeah.
And I opted not. And a lot of times I think about, well, I wonder what I could have experienced good if I'd stayed there. So that was just one.
But you'd still join the service, you'd still go to Vietnam.
Yes.
In a heartbeat, right?
I would.
There you go.
I would.
There you go.
I don't think I would have said that then, but I would.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Jim Hoessle, Medina County resident, Vietnam veteran. Thank you. We'll see you again next month.
Hey, did you know that 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Go to theshelterpetproject.org and search your local shelters and rescues. Go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Ready or not, here I come.
Take time to be a dad today.